All right, Ken Sanders, you're on.
Greg?
I'm doing well. Well, first of all, I'm going to tell you something that I know about Ken Sanders. He has a lot of influential friends. When we were considering Ken on the committees, he had a lot of support here in St. Louis, but he had other support, and I'm just going to read you two sentences now. This one says, "Dear Greg, I hope this letter finds you well. On behalf of Major League Baseball, it is my pleasure to endorse Ken Sanders as a candidate for the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame. I believe that Ken Sanders would be a wonderful addition to the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame, and I thank you for the consideration. Sincerely, Alan Bud Selig."
That cost me a lot of money.
Well, I tell you what, no pressure there. Now I have a handwritten one, and this is just as effective because I'll just read the last sentence. "Ken is a great business person, golfer, family man, and baseball player. It's an honor to have Ken as a friend all these years. Roy Sievers, St. Louis Browns." This one is from Dan Foster, the Chief Executive Officer of the Major League Baseball Players Alumni. And the last one is my good buddy, and it says, "Dear Greg, I'm writing to recommend Ken Sanders for consideration as a nominee to the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame." And then he's got a few more paragraphs. "Sincerely, Bob Costas." So, you know, I sat in the meeting and said, I don't think he's got enough here. Well, Ken, let's get going with this. Tell us about your time at St. Louis University High School.
Well, that was one of the turning points probably in my career. And I think that when I think back, the Jesuit education, the discipline I learned here, and I met two great coaches that were very instrumental in my life. Of course, Doc Robinson and Robbie, as affectionately known by my teammates or some here tonight. But interestingly enough, I showed the picture of our 1959 baseball team, and my oldest grandson, Joe Dog, said, "Well, that coach is awful little. How tall was he, Grandpa?" And of course, Robbie was very small. But Robbie taught me how to play baseball. And Ebby Dunn. I had a passion for winning. And in the early years, maybe my temper wasn't what it should have been. But I remember Ebby, he taught me how to be a man on the field. And not that I could ever tolerate defeat, but I learned to cope with it through Eddie. So those were two really driving forces with me. And my senior year here, we had great athletes on that team in all sports. And as all of the honorees tonight will, I'm sure, reinforce that no player wins without a good teammate. So I learned that. One of the things I regretted about the Jesuit and the Jesuit education, they never negotiated my contracts. I'd have made a hell of a lot more money, I think.
And Macaulay always said that too. Well, Rich Grauer, you spent 1 year at the University of Missouri. You think that was short. Ken here got a 4-year ride to SLUH, and he stayed a month. 1 month. He didn't even unpack. Never got to a class because he was signed by the Oakland A's in 1960.
The Kansas City A's.
I'm sorry, the Kansas City
Kansas
Athletics in 1960. Tell us about that first season.
Well, all sports are different today, but that first year I was 18 when I left St. Louis University and decided to turn pro. And if you know much about baseball, you'll appreciate this. The first year as an 18-year-old, I pitched 241 innings. And starters today, if they pitch 180 innings in the big leagues, that's a lot. But also that year, I pitched about 50 innings in winter ball, so I almost pitched 300 innings. So that was the start of my career. And had some interesting journeys after that to get to the big leagues.
Let's stay that first season for a minute, though. You were 19-10 in the Florida State League, your very first year, with a 3.21 ERA, and you were a starter. And then what made the switch from starter to reliever?
Well, the first 3 years I started, first two were real easy, and then I got elevated all the way to AAA, and I lost 11 straight games, and I ended up 3-18. So I had a rude awakening, and the next year, 1964, was a real big turning year for me. I played for the Birmingham Barons in 1964, and we were the first integrated sports team in the history of Alabama. And about three things have impacted my life that year. Number one, as I looked through the eyes of my three black teammates, I saw things that I never saw before. And it gave me a different perspective, not only on the game, but on life in general. And those three black players on that team are dear friends. Blue Moon Odom was one, had a wonderful major league career. Tommy Reynolds, dear friend to this day, had great careers. The other things that impacted it, I never had a good curveball. And the manager there, he did two things. He made me a reliever, and he said, you got to take that curveball and get rid of it. He taught me how to throw a slider. I went to the big leagues that year, and I went on to pitch 10 years in the big leagues, and I threw not one curveball. So that was a big change from the way the game's played today.
It's like a bowler not throwing a hook, Ray.
That's right. That's right.
Holy smokes. You had a memorable first appearance in the big leagues, though. Tell the folks about that, the visit to Yankee Stadium, 1964.
That opened my eyes, too. My first game that I played, pitched in, was against the New York Yankees. And they had Berra, Elston Howard, Roger Maris, and my first strikeout happened to be a switch hitter, but Mickey Mantle. And I think that was the only time I got Mickey out. But, I must say one thing. As time passes, and, Henry's younger than me, and he maybe enjoyed the dollar signs a little more than I did. But, that year, the minimum salary in the major leagues was $6,000. And if you stayed in the big league 60 days, you got a $1,000 increase. So on the 55th, 56th, 57th day, they sent you back to the minor leagues to save $1,000, and then they'd bring you back up. But after striking out Mickey about a month later, I came down from a high because Joe Pepitone hit a 3-run homer, and I thought that this isn't as easy as it looks.
Take us from that day through the process before you get to the Milwaukee Brewers.
Well, I kind of bounced around up and down with the major leagues, and I had another interesting thing happen in my career. I was traded from the Oakland A's to the Seattle Pilots, and we go to spring training in the February of 1970. And the Seattle Pilots filed bankruptcy. So we're in spring training, Tempe, Arizona, and we don't know if we're going to have a team, where we're going to play, are we going to get paid, what do we do with our families? And with 5 days left in the season, we were told to meet in a hotel banquet room, place similar to this tonight. And my teammates and I are all waiting, and the door opened, and 5 men walked in. And one of my teammates sitting next to me, Marty Patton, said, "That's Jerry Lewis. He bought the team." I said, "That's not Jerry Lewis." They did have a little similarity when they were young. It was Bud Selig. So I've teased Bud about that many times. And if Bud was here tonight, and he's a dear friend, Selig's been to our kids' weddings and stuff, but I've told that to Bud, and Bud said, you know, the biggest fear I had buying that team was how am I going to pay the salaries of 25 players and 5 coaches? The 30 of us, our salaries were $729,000, just barely over the minimum of one player today. And Bud paid $10 million for that franchise. That's a pretty good purchase.
You get to the Brewers, and you share something with Ned Garver. I don't know if you all know who he is. Ned Garver pitched for the St. Louis Browns and other teams, but he holds a distinction in Major League Baseball still today. He is the only pitcher ever to win 20 games in a season while his team lost 100. Quite a deal. You came pretty close to that kind of a deal. Your first Brewers team lost 97 games, but you set the team relief record. You found a way to save 13 games and had a 5-2 record, and most impressively, that 1.75 ERA.
Well, that's one of my, I think, personal distinctions that I hold dear to myself, that I ended a 10-year career with a 2.97 ERA. And of course, in that next year, I was Brewer MVP, and my watch keeps coming loose, but Sporting News honored me right here in St. Louis as Relief Pitcher of the Year. So I thought I'd wear my watch that we received in those days. In fact, Joe Torre has a watch like this. His was for leading the lead in batting that year. But I was fortunate I got to pitch a lot in Milwaukee. I pitched in 83 games that year and finished 77 of them, which is fourth to this day all-time Major League record. And that was such a great year. I thought, hell, I'm going to be here 10 years. Let's buy a home. Marianne and I bought a home, was traded 9 months later. So we still made our home in Milwaukee.
Well, in '71, you led the Major League Baseball. You had 83 appearances, which at that time was a MLB record. And you finished 77 games. So in those days, you pitched multiple innings in relief?
Well, when we had the lead in the 6th and 7th inning, you know, I was in the game. You know, today you have a 6th inning man, a 7th inning man, an 8th inning man, and a closer. So it was one of those things, you know, they give you the ball, you go out and play, you go out and pitch. And I was fortunate. I had Dave Bristol managed a number of years in the big leagues. My manager, he gave me the opportunity to pitch.
Got a good funny story to tell us?
I played for another great St. Louis player. He was my manager 2 years in New York, Yogi Berra. And everybody asks, what's your favorite Yogiism? And it's a true story. My wife was there, and my sister-in-law was there, but we're playing in Shea Stadium. True story. 3 streakers jumped over the fence, ran onto the field. The only thing they had on were bags over their heads. So in the press conference after the game, the media asked Yogi, could you tell the sex of those 3 streakers? Yogi said, hell no, they had bags over their heads. We were there.
Kids, you didn't hear that. Be the last time you get to come to one of these deals. So you finished a great career, and by the way, the Brewers started a Wall of Honor. I'm not sure what year for sure, but this man was in the very first class of the Milwaukee Brewers Wall of Honor.
Thank you.
By the way, tell us one more thing about that year where your first 18 appearances, your ERA was 0.00. Didn't hold up.
No, I had some rough stretches after that, but you know how the game is, regardless of the sports. Those other guys aren't out there to make outs or to you know, go down the tube. They're going to get you. Well,
after baseball, now I know you wanted to mention it too. You had a very successful career. You were president of a few organizations in baseball, you do charitable work, and you became a real estate agent. And I got to tell the one piece of trivia that is important. This guy participated in a real estate deal that actually affected the movie industry and baseball. Anybody think of what it might be?
Joe Dog knows.
Oh, you read the story already. He sold the Field of Dreams in Dyersville, Iowa. Tell us about that.
Well, that was a special thing. After I got out of the game, I went into business because I didn't make the money they're making today. But I met a man, he got me interested in real estate, and I got my broker's license, joined him. And I still wanted to stay in the game because that old saying, baseball been very, very good to me. But I ran a couple of fantasy camps. In 94, 95, I had the Field of Dreams fantasy camps. It was a special thing. The campers came out of the corn, and we just had a special time. And then one day I got a call from the owner of the Field of Dreams, and he said, Ken, we want to sell the movie site, and we know you have baseball contacts. We know you are a broker, a real estate broker. Can you help us? So I listed it and I sold it. And that was just a special thing because if you haven't been to the Field of Dreams, it truly is a Field of Dreams. And a lot of special things happen. And the one thing that it's hard to believe, to this day, they average 70,000 people tour that field every year.
You didn't sell it to Disney, did you?
No, I didn't sell it to Disney. I tried to sell it to Kevin Costner, but he had no interest.
To wrap it up, you want to talk about all these people here. He wins the award for most fans here.
Yeah. We have 40 family and friends. The table over here I played for 9 teams in my 10-year career. So I always said either 9 teams wanted me or 9 didn't. But they only have 8 hats. So I have to get them a new hat. And we have grandkids, whatever. But I do want my wife of 53 years to stand up because she has been special. Mary Ann, stand up. She's an Ursuline Academy graduate. And as you can see, I married my trophy wife first. Thank you, Mary Ann. Thank you.
And finally, to the Palombos, who also locally pestered us for a long time for Ken Sanders, Joe and Jim, and of course we're all going to get on Jim because he's not here tonight, but we'll get to that later. Ken, a great career. He was elected to the Brewers All-Decade Team of the 70s, named to that first class of the Wall of Honor was 2014, enshrined this day, February 18th, 2016. Welcome to the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame.
Thank you. I'm honored and I'm humbled.